OR Media present Audio Articles, Culture Corner series. Poetry and Divine Intervention by Redwald OR. For those whose lives consist merely of the mundane, and by mundane I do not necessarily mean dull or tedious, but simply a level of existence which deals with the material world, of physicality and of the here and now, poetry is often considered as something irrelevant, if indeed it is considered at all. Some of the blame for this train of thought could be laid at the door of those modernist poets who seem to pervade the popular culture of our time. The Kali Yuga poets, whose inspiration comes from the base world around them, and who are often surrounded by cities rather than nature. With our enemy's never-ending quest to lower the standards of our folk, these contemporary poets are given plenty of opportunity to obscure sun's rays and cast their shadows along across Midgard. Often the stereotypical picture of a modern Odinist is essentially masculine, vigorous, and lowbrow. This would be the media interpretation, but as often happens, a stereotype can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Odinists cast themselves in the mistaken image of their gods, and Thor becomes a Hollywood-inspired caricature of choice, muscular, brave, and rash. Yet, as quantum theorists and religious esoteric practitioners alike understand, there are many levels of everything. What the believers of Odinic stereotypes do not see, however, is that for every Thor there is an Odin. For every display of vigour and passion there is an Odinist sitting quietly, breathing slowly through the nose, and thinking as though on a heath rather than in a city apartment. To the Odinist rooted in the world of exotericism, the ideas and thought processes required for poetry are strange. There is nothing wrong with this. For some, the idea of deeper spirituality will forever remain distant. Some come to it over time, others connect quickly. But for those who feel a calling to the esoteric, occult side of our faith, the fact that poetry is at the heart of our Hyperborean religion is obvious. Whether it is Odin's quest for the runes, with the aid of the poetic mead of inspiration, or simply the fact that the Eddas were in a poetic format, poetry stares us in the face wherever we turn. Poetry is divinity working through us. In both Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the first lines were invocations to an unnamed goddess and an unnamed muse respectively, both of which were divine. The male poet would call on a divine female, for the very reason nature requires the coupling of a male and female for procreation. In order to create, the forces of man and woman must combine, be they mortal or godly. Such poets or bards were antennas for the divine creative spark needed to transfer tales of heroes and gods to their audience, just as the solar comet collides with the earthly female planet. Thus poetry is created by a combination of forces. Here, divine powers are called upon as the poet begins his narration of the Iliad and the Odyssey, proving that Homer knew how the forces of creation were combined. It is plausible that Homer was a traveller from Hyperborea, either in reality or mythologically speaking. The first lines of the Iliad, the Robert Fagles translation, 1990. Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous doomed, that cost the Achaeans countless losses. The first lines of the Odyssey, Robert Fagel's translation, 1996. Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course. Once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Within the ranks of the Odinic rite, there should be no pressure to adopt an esoteric, poetic viewpoint. The natural progression of our faith and the way of Weird will guide us into our proper role. But it should be noted that in ancient times the warrior, priest, king were one and the same. Divinity powered the mind and the body towards eternal glory. Odinic Gothias and Gythias should not be considered weak in body, no more than our martial artists and soldiers and weightlifters should be thought of as weak in mind. The striving towards wassail, being whole, encompasses all these things and more. When Odin consults the seer in Völuspá, he goes as a pilgrim seeking answers, as must we all. He goes with humility, which is the key to greater understanding. Paraphrasing a section of Elsa Britta Tichenel's Masks of Odin, she says in her introduction to Völuspá that sacrifice brings us the inner light needed to illuminate our path to godhood, which will be gained through conscious effort and self-conscious regeneration in the ultimate reunion with our divine source. In some circles, sacrifice means death, but sacrifice is many things. It can be time, which is in fact a small death. Time must be given to achieve those things we strive towards. To write poetry, we must think poetically, and to think poetically distances us from the mundane and sends us on a journey into a world that lies without and also within. Or, as our book of Blottar phrases it, let us be aware of the God force within and around us. All things sought by tree-hung grim are likewise waiting for our kin. As eyes close tight, we are set free. Through our breath we look and see. Hail Bragi, poet. You've been listening to an OR Media audio presentation.